Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement, getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on us authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
Good morning, everyone. This morning, I'm going to have the computer read a passage out of the book. It's about 12 minutes long. And then after that, we can talk about it, whatever you want to talk about. I refer to the Bible quite a bit in my book. This is not because I think the Bible was written by God or that I am religious. The Bible is written by men, and it gives us a pretty long history of how humans react to circumstances. And that's basically about what my book's about. So there's a lot of examples in there that speaks to what I'm trying to say. And there's one particular individual in the Bible that stands out, and that's Jesus. And in fact, I just checked, and I refer to Jesus' name 22 times in my book. Now, this isn't because I know what was really going on in Jesus' mind. It's not because I really know he even existed or not. I wasn't back there then, so I certainly have no firsthand evidence. But there is a story about a guy, and that story carries a lot of meaning to me, and it reveals a lot about how I feel about things. And my book is based on how I feel about things. So by sharing with you what that story means to me, you're going to learn a lot about how I feel about things. I don't know what was going on in Jesus' mind when he went to the cross, but I know what would have been going on in my mind if I had done what he did. I like to think it was going on in his mind, but I don't know. So, but through his story, you get a lot. You can understand where I'm at, and what the book is about, where I'm at. So I think that my interpretation of his story will inform you a lot about where the book is coming from. So I forgot to announce Chet Shupe, my name, author of the book, Rediscovering the Wisdom of Human Nature, How Civilization Destroys Happiness. So I'm going to allow the computer, it can do a lot better job of reading than I can. I got ADD, so I got an excuse to let the reader read this for me. So afterwards, we'll talk about this or whatever you want to talk. It takes about 12 minutes.
Though evolution has genetically predisposed all humans to treat each other in ways that ensure our species' success, the record of human history is rife with examples of humans committing atrocities. This contradiction in our social behavior causes us to believe that human nature has a dark side. But, does it? It's true that, throughout the history of civilization, soldiers have dutifully obeyed when governments ordered them to commit such atrocities as torture, genocide, and the decimation of indigenous cultures. They do so, not because it is in their nature to harm people who have not offended them, personally, but because institutions, not human nature, rule their lives. As institutional subjects, men go to war in the belief that God is on their side. This illusion, more than any other, justifies inhuman behavior. Also, people ruled by institutions have no option other than to obey. We obey the dictates of institutions in order to be socially acceptable, to maintain our legal and economic station, and to avoid prison, or, in some instances, even execution. This so-called dark side of humanity is just one of the many perversities that are thrust upon all modern human beings. This apparent human dark side has puzzled mankind for centuries. But, there's no real mystery involved. People simply fail to grasp that it is part of the overarching system of control, through which legal subjugation compels people to leave their human nature behind, in order to commit inhumane acts. The unfortunate result is that it causes us to redouble our belief that rules and laws are necessary to protect us from one another. This eventually results in even more inhumane acts. There seems to be no limit to the depravity of which institutionally subjugated people are capable. For me, the crucifixion of Jesus is the quintessential example of how far civilized people are willing to go, for the sake of maintaining civil order. The story of Jesus' life implies that he orchestrated his own crucifixion. I believe he went to the cross to awaken us to the mindless behavior that legal subjugation imposes on mankind. When he was brought before the government, Jesus baited the state, by refusing, based on the wisdom of his own soul, to acknowledge the state as sovereign. He saw nature/God as sovereign, not the state. By refusing to acknowledge the state as sovereign, he forced the state to crucify him, despite his innocence of any actual wrongdoing. By taking the bait, the state revealed the message Jesus so desired to convey that he surrendered his life to do so, that nation-states can tolerate only subjects, not people who are being true to the wisdom of their souls. In essence, Jesus forced the state to crucify him for the crime of being human. Jesus did not go to the cross to save mankind, as Christianity teaches. He died on the cross to awaken us to the absurdity of our circumstances, so we could save ourselves. His sacrifice demonstrates the mindlessness that institutional subjugation imposes on all civilized people, from the leaders who order the killing, to the populace who demands it, to the soldiers who are duty-bound to carry it out. Seeing nature/God as sovereign, Jesus realized that all expressions of life must comply with the laws of nature, in order to live on this planet. Mankind's claim that states are sovereign, is tantamount to pronouncing that mankind, not nature, is now in control. We humans have demonstrated that we have the power to affect the forces of nature. Our problem is we are not sufficiently aware of the big picture, to assume command. We are so unaware, in fact, that we can't even agree on life's purpose. As a consequence of this general lack of awareness, our well-intended efforts to make the world a better place have unintended consequences that far outweigh any planned benefits. Instead of resolving what we perceive to be life's problems, we create problems for which there are no solutions. When the pile of unsolvable problems gets high enough, every state fails, proving, for the umpteenth time, that states are not sovereign. Quote, "Every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world." Arthur Schopenhauer. Our limited awareness renders us innocent of intentional wrongdoing. But know this, outlawing our emotional intelligence, in the belief that our reasoning power places us in control of life, puts our species up against the forces of evolution that created it. We need to ask ourselves whether we really want a way of life that keeps us fighting the forces of evolution, or one in which we function as organic expressions of those forces. I trust that the answer to that question is obvious, but there is more to it than just choosing. Good intentions, alone, will not suffice. Living in concert with the forces of creation requires an expanded awareness of the nature of our circumstances. The most essential element of that new awareness is the realization that the state is not sovereign. Only with that knowledge, will we regain the sensibilities needed to free our spirits. Jesus' crucifixion demonstrated that the state's claim of sovereignty is an illusion. If a state's claim of sovereignty were real, it could do anything. One thing the state has proven it cannot do, is to create the peaceful and just world it promises. But, Jesus' sacrifice revealed that there is something else a state cannot do. It cannot acquit anyone who, from the state's perspective, has committed the ultimate crime of refusing to recognize it as sovereign. Otherwise, everyone would ignore its claim of sovereignty, in which case the state would cease to exist. All Jesus had to do, to demonstrate that state sovereignty is an illusion, was to refuse to recognize the state's claim of sovereignty. By that simple act, Jesus manipulated the state to respond in the only way it can, by condemning him. Jesus demonstrated that the state is not all-powerful, placing it in the position of having no choice, but to eliminate him, though he had committed no real crime. Why can't a state's subjects see that the emperor has no clothes? It's the ultimate example of confirmation bias, the subconscious mind's inability to recognize evidence that refutes the beliefs in which it presently finds comfort. Adapting to institutional subjugation has rendered civilized people so materially and emotionally dependent on the state's services that people cannot imagine how human life could exist without it. This renders each human organism functionally blind to the possibility that the state's claim of sovereignty is an illusion. States do have powers, of course, but their authority is limited to confinement. Not only do civilized people suffer, as a consequence, but our species' life cannot be taken care of, so long as its members remain detained in pens, whether emotional or physical. Mankind possesses the innate awareness needed to rejoin the animals in life's celebration, on this planet. But our recovery is in question, because confirmation bias, combined with our limited conscious awareness, blinds us to the limitations of the powers we do possess. By instinct, we have the power to sustain the life of our species, which is quite a magnificent thing. But to again exercise that power, we must first pay attention to the pain we feel, in our current circumstances. It is a message from nature calling our attention to the need to return to the way of life that frees us to serve our species. To experience the contentment that results from serving life, we need the freedom to react according to how we feel in each moment, not according to how we think we are going to feel, decades into the future. When being true to our feelings of the moment we are serving life. Thus, we live in our comfort zone, even when facing hardships. But, when having to deny how we really feel to protect a legal and monetary identity on behalf of imagined future circumstances, we exist almost entirely outside our comfort zone, even when our circumstances appear to be ideal. Jesus' sacrifice demonstrates how institutional subjugation warps our nature-given sensibilities, to the point that we will kill a man like him, for the sake of civil order. I believe there will come a time when people finally recognize that. Then, I believe, they will relieve themselves of institutional dependence, to again embrace each other as sisters and brothers, in spiritual homes where they depend on one another to survive. By doing so, they will save their emotional lives, and attain the spiritual authority to stand up against institutional subjugation. It's one thing to kill a man like Jesus, who refused to surrender his spiritual authority when instructed by the state. But it's quite another thing to kill a body of women and men, who love one another, as a result of trusting their relationships to spiritual obligations. Furthermore, in the act of participating in the life of a spiritual home, people will expose the lie upon which civilization is founded, the lie that the human spirit is untrustworthy. As lies go, it is outrageous, because, if the human spirit is, in truth, untrustworthy, how did Homo sapiens thrive for 200,000 years, before legal systems ever existed? All that is required for humanity to reconnect with the awesome wisdom and grace of the human spirit is for us to re-establish spiritual homes, homes in which the family members are bonded by their need for one another, a need that can be realized only by their belief in the human spirit. Caution: freeing our spirits requires awareness, not revolution. Don't blame the people who continue honoring the state as sovereign. They are displaying a lack of awareness, not ill intent. Discussing the limitations of a state must never be a call for arms. People who inspire armed insurrections are acting on the flawed belief that they have the answer to the world's problems. What they are actually doing is unintentionally planting the seeds for another state. There is no answer to the world's problems. Life is a problem. The spirits of all animate beings evolved to take pleasure in dealing with the problem of life. We are fortunate, it turns out, that the state's claim of sovereignty is, indeed, an illusion. If a state were capable of fulfilling what it promises, by solving what we perceive to be the world's problems, we would have the power to design our own idealistic world, for example, one in which we could eternally enjoy anything we wanted, without having to do anything to get it. Such a clockwork existence, void of uncertainties, however, would render our spirits useless. Eventually, we would lose our ability to feel, as surely as a bird species, whose members don't need their wings to survive, eventually lose their ability to fly. As things stand, either we humans will gain the awareness needed to free our spirits, so they can again celebrate the problems of life, or we will eventually cease to exist. The rest of life on this planet will then proceed normally. If we humans are to regain access to the wisdom of our own souls, at some point we have to start believing in our own emotional natures. Yes, it's as simple as that. And, when we do that, we will again be possessed by the desire to become the agents of life we were born to be. It is my conviction that our spiritual awakening, our salvation, our happiness, and our species' ability to get back on track rest on one thing: that we recognize the centrality of feelings in human existence, thus, understand the need to surrender our designs on the future. Then, we will again live our lives loving and being loved, because our sense of well-being will be based on spiritual obligations. Once humans regain their natural trust in the human spirit, humanity will be immune to the false promise of a glorious and certain future, guaranteed by our strict compliance with legal obligations.
Well, hello again. If any of you have any remarks or questions, we'll talk about it. Here I've got one, Ethan. Do you see humanity in the near future going back to nature in a meaningful solidarity? Hey, I like that, meaningful solidarity. Yeah. I make no predictions about the future. I mean, see, that is mankind's mistake, thinking we can know the future. And thinking we can know that, then thinking we can prepare it to fulfill what we think our future needs are going to be. So that's dangerous stuff. See, the reason the animals are still, I'm sorry, are still attending to life's real problems because they don't have the linguistic skills to conceptualize the future and talk to each other about. In other words, they're not scared of the future. So they live, they're emotionally connected to now. because we can conceptualize the future. We're scared of it. And that's why we can't emotionally connect to now, because that fear, well, let's put it this way, it is our fear of the future scared the life out of us. That's one way of saying it. So, in your answer, do I think humans will soon go back to being true to ourselves? Well, I have no way to answer that. I mean, right now, our whole sense of identity, we've spent our whole lives. We've got these marvelous educations and all this. We've invested in one thing, being able to control our future. Our identity is in paperwork, because that paperwork expresses the rights we have for the future. And if we don't keep that paperwork up to date, we may find ourselves arriving at the future with nowhere to live. So I'm not blaming anyone, or I mean, no one is to be blamed for being afraid of the future. But once we understand, our fear of the future is why we created governments, why we give people the right to own things, and we give them the right to accumulate personal wealth. So our only access to survival is to accumulate personal wealth. And in order to do that, we have to deny how we feel in the moment 1,000 times a day. And that's why I say civilization creates unhappiness, because you can't be happy when you are pretending you're something you're not for the sake of your future well-being. So I'm just saying that our whole identity about what we are as a human being is tied up in these beliefs. Well, there's billions of neurons in our heads in which we find about the only comfort we have. And they've configured themselves about the only comfort we can find is that we are actually in control of our future. And so we would have to lose that identity. Well, that's not an easy identity to lose. And so whether it can happen, I don't know. But I do say one thing. If it's ever going to happen, we have to understand how we got in this situation before we can get out. We've got all these world problems that we're trying to solve. But I am suggesting that those aren't the problem. The problem is that we are not being true to our animal nature, which millions of years have proven, not only in our species, but countless others, that they can celebrate life while sustaining it. So both their lives and the life of their species simultaneously get fulfilled. You see, we are living in an unfulfilled state of mind because we have to deny who we really are to survive. See, this life gives us no spiritual wealth. I mean, it don't give us much love or anything. We can survive. But when you get to the point of what's the meaning of survival without love, there might be people to say, hey, I don't want any designs on the future. I want to figure out how I can live without any designs in the future, because that's the only way I'm ever going to be true to myself. And that's the only place where real contentment comes. Well, once you do that, then you understand that the only way any social primate on this planet can live, and that's what we are, social primates, is with a body of brothers and sisters who are trusting their lives to each other. And when I mean trusting, without any record keeping. I mean, it's all managed by instincts, those complex social orders. All that order you see in that's not managed by a Supreme Court. That's not managed by an army protecting a bunch of institutions that are telling those elephants how to live. That comes from the inside of each animal out there. And I'm saying we've got that ability. And if we get to the point where we become disillusioned. Instead of saying all is lost, then we may say, hey, there's a silver lining here. Because when we no longer believe in institutions, there's only one thing left on this planet for us to believe in, and that's each other's souls. And then is when we can know what life's about. What do you think the most optimal social system that can make most, if not all citizens in society, have the right opportunities and resources? Well, there's no system. I mean, when you say a social system, you're talking about a government that tries to write on a piece of paper, a constitution, in 1,000 words or 10,000 words or in 1,000,000 words. I don't care how many words there are. How millions of people are going to live in peace with each other for eternity. That's what we're writing. We are trying to put everything each of our souls know on that document so life can go on. Well, once we understand the ridiculousness of that, there will be no way. Yeah, it'll be a shock, but don't despair. That shock is the beginning of a recovery. But first we got to experience the shock, no pain, no gain. So I'm just saying, nature, see by the way you propose that question, and I appreciate it. And that is a question that civil rule is bound to solve for ever since it existed. By imposing that question, I see my time's about up, so I'm going to have to get off here. But see, you're assuming there's a fair, ideal world out there. There is none, and nature is not fair. Nature gives us no rights. Nature don't give you the right to live. If nature gave you the right to live, there would be no diseases, there'd be no still death, there'd be no predation. No, what nature gives you is the ability to celebrate life, to celebrate its uncertainties. And only the human spirit can give us that freedom. Anytime we try to create some ideal existence, then we are shutting down our souls for the sake of illusions. Well, I've got to get off here. Let's see. Can the moderator tell me how much time there's left? Or anyhow, I'll just say that again, I'm Jessica Felton, excited to read more about your work. Chet, thanks. Well, thank you for the comment. And my book is my website is Rediscovering the Wisdom. No, my website is spiritualfreedompress.com. And if you do a backslash at the end of that com and say intro, you can enter a part of my website where you can get a PDF version of the book download for free, no cost. And I'm doing that for you putting up with me. That's not out in the general public or anything, but for you folks, it's there. And I appreciate your time to listen to me today, and I hope there's something meaningful comes of it all. Oh, I see I've got 5 minutes left. Okay. Well, I forgot the question. I sort of stopped in the middle of answering because I looked at my watch and I thought maybe it was about to cut off time. So if you can bring that last question up, or what do you think the most optimal? Well, see, the problem is, the only life is not about us. It's not about our survival even. It's about the survival of the species. See, and if we are devoted to the species survival, which by the way requires our spiritual freedom, we have no intellectual way to know which speed. There is no way to put in words who we're supposed to mate with to produce a baby that the species wants. So all we know is that we feel romance. That's the species telling us what to do right now. And if we do that, we will experience pleasure. We will experience fulfillment. If we don't do it, I mean, if we got contracts, if we got legal obligations so we can't do it, we experience pain. As a matter of fact, we experience pain so severe that a lot of people, when they reject a romance for whatever reason, but legal obligations is the most, they say it's just like I decided not to live. Now, I'm not saying it's right or wrong for them to do anything. That's just the way things are. In other words, when we are trying to create an ideal existence, we're in double jeopardy. We can either be true to what is, which our feelings of the moment tell us, or we can be true to our plans. Can't be true to both. And that's double jeopardy. It means you're either going to suffer now by denying nature, or you're going to suffer in the future by screwing up the rest of your life. In other words, as it has to be lived to survive in this culture. I see there someone said, I'm sorry, I didn't read your name in time, but I think we're all, yeah, Bob Montgomery, I think we all learn a lot from you and your book. Well, I appreciate it. You know, like I said at the beginning, I don't know the truth. I don't think any of us know the truth. All we know is how we feel. That's my truth. So I feel like it's true. You know, Will Rogers said, I never met a man I didn't like. I will say I never met a man that didn't think he'd know the truth. Well, I am one of those men. I think I know, but that's kind of ridiculous when you think about it. All I know is how I feel. That is my truth. And I would like to think that if enough people come to want to connect with each other without any record keeping, that it would be possible. And through that connection, we would know what life is about. You know, there was some famous author, Campbell, he says, I don't think people are looking for the meaning of life as much as they're looking for the experience of being alive. And that's when we're trying to fit in with what institutions want us to be, we sort of have to deny ourselves so severely that it not only severs our emotional connections with the people around it, but it severs our emotional connections with our own souls to where we don't even know ourselves. And so how can we love one another? Well, not only are our connections to one another severed by the lack of interdependence, but when we don't even know ourselves. Okay, well, I've got a couple more of these with you. I'll be back. One is on Wednesday and one is on Friday, same time, same station. And I appreciate you folks taking the time to put up with me, and hopefully something good may come of it. Thank you.